Recent cyber attacks on industrial facilities, including one of the country's biggest water suppliers, has turned the spotlight on whether utilities and other groups are properly protected from cyber attacks. We'll talk about the latest concerns and solutions for these groups on this episode of Today in Tech. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Today in Tech. I'm Keith Shaw. Joining me on the show today is Ian Bramson. He is the Vice President of Global Industrial Cybersecurity at Black & Veatch. Welcome to the show, Ian.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
All right. So, there's been a lot of stories recently about this. And again, when I say recently, it could be in the last few months or so. It's actually been a quiet couple of weeks. So when you talk with, clients or other people in this industry, what are the biggest problems that utilities and other critical infrastructure groups are facing this year? And then as we head into next year, what kind of are the big top issues?
Well, the whole industry is in a point of change right now, where you've got a lot of different kinds of attacks coming in, but more importantly, the whole complexion of the environment is changing, the threat environment. And what I mean by that is you have a lot of different threat actors, meaning people who want to do bad stuff,
Right.
coming in and wanting to target high-value targets. High-value targets are anyone in critical infrastructure. So utilities are part of that. And the bad guys are learning how to attack these utilities in their operational technology or the OT side. And the good guys are learning how to defend it, right? This is all an emerging area. So you can see this sort of back and forth of learning how to go do it. And so we're in the middle of that right now. And so you'll see a change over in the industry where they're starting to focus on things like safety.
Mm-hmm.
We need to consider this a safety issue, not just, hey, you're going to take my data, but really, what are you going to do in what we call the cyber physical world? You also have to understand that, people are looking at this and going, well, we got to protect our existing fleets and we got to go in there and we got to figure out what's there. But we also have to start thinking about building it in. And that's where is something that is emerging into the conversation now, is saying, how do we build in cyber, not just bolt it on later? And what do we do? On the adversary side, they're looking for different ways to get in. One of the popular ones of late had been ransomware, and ransomware is certainly an important one. You've been hearing that for a little while in the industry now, how those attacks are happening and how they specifically target the operational technology environment is certainly changing. But one thing I always tell my customers or our clients and anyone in the industry is don't just fight the last battle.
Right.
And don't just look at the last thing. Look at what's next. This is a constantly changing environment. So you have third-party exposures. You have your supply chains. Everything's getting more connected, more digital, more automated. All these points are creating a larger attack surface, ways bad folks can get in and what they can do. And so what we say is this, at this point of change, you got to prepare for the unknown, right? And that change is going to accelerate as we go along. So
Yeah.
that's when I say the complexion is changing. It comes down to those basic points: safety. It comes down to building it in, not bolting it on, and preparing for the unknown, not just the kind of set of stuff that you just saw in the in the newspapers.
Yeah. Do you think that there are more attacks happening, this time around, like within the last couple of years versus maybe 10, 15 years ago? Because I know that this issue's been around for a while. Because I remember working in Network World, we were covering, I think it was the SCADA stuff for utilities. And correct me if I'm wrong on the pronunciation of that, or the, but that was one of the.
It's all good any way you want to pronounce it. But you're absolutely right. So industrial cyber isn't necessarily a new target. It's just the rate of change has gone up, and it's gone for a few reasons. One is things got more connected in that OT environment,
right?
And that's going faster. We're not getting less connected. We're going to get more connected, right? And so that's part of the challenge and the issue. It's also that you had some events that triggered the acceleration of stuff. So what, 3 or 4 years ago, you had Colonial Pipeline attack.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Colonial Pipeline attack is technically an IT attack, but it had an OT consequence. And that's an important point because that's affecting how things go now. It was a while ago, but it was a seminal point because it was a warning bell to all the good guys. Hey, we got to go protect our stuff. But it was a dinner bell to all the bad guys when they went, wait, what can I do now? I can shut down oil
Right,
to
right.
the East Coast for a week. So you saw after that a lot more attacks on critical infrastructure, and you started seeing government getting more involved and not, having a lot more support mechanisms. And sometimes it's in the regulatory or mandates or executive orders. So you had a flurry of activity, and so you saw from that point on different kinds of attacks that are happening and different activity on both sides of that digital line escalating. So
Yeah,
that's what
yeah.
you are correct, and that's been around for a while, but it's starting to go up, and I know that's not going to go down.
Right.
Right.
And have you seen the rise of digitalization, automation, the types of digital transformation that IT people are talking about all the time? Has that contributed to a weakening of the system, or is it just an after effect, I guess?
It's something that makes OT cyber now a business imperative. And what I mean by that is before they're like, oh, we're not really thinking about it. But when you start connecting all sorts of stuff that wasn't ever designed to be connected, and that's what's happening in OT.
Yeah.
In IT, you replace equipment pretty quickly. In OT, you don't replace that equipment. Sometimes a turbine you don't replace for every 30 years
Right.
plus. All right. So now you've been putting a bunch of technology on top of it. Some of it is obsolete and, kind of paper clips and rubber bands sometimes holding the stuff together. Like you're trying to get it going, and uptime is everything. And so now we're saying, oh man, we can digitize stuff, we can automate stuff. It's great, but now you have this legacy challenge where you're connecting stuff that wasn't supposed to be
Right.
connected, and so it's causing different kinds of issues and unpredictable types of challenges.
Yeah, and I want to get to the separation of between IT and OT in a second, but first I want to ask, when you look at all of the problems that a lot of these groups are facing, what are they struggling with? Because I just have a list of 5 different eyes just off the top of my head. Like, budgets obviously is a big issue. Older systems, you brought that up. So, some of these are tougher to, I want to say patch or connect, but there are some older systems. There's so many different attacks out there. Maybe there's a lack of priorities, and then even people not knowing what they might have. And then the 5th one, which is always my favorite, is the board level mandates, which is like the CEO of the company is like, well, we're going to digitally transform everything, and that includes all of our turbines and all this industrial stuff. So is this a little bit of everything, or are there certain ones that have a higher priority on the problems that they're facing?
Well, you're pretty accurately describing the environment. It
Yeah.
is this emerging environment, so you got a lot of different kinds of priorities coming in. I'm going to summarize some of the bigger ones I've heard that you say and add a couple. So a lot of times people are saying, "Hey, we realize now that we got to get safe, right? We're seeing this stuff, and safety and uptime are top. So they'll turn to whoever they want, senior management, or whoever they think should manage it. That's the first challenge. They don't know who to assign often. So they'll turn more frequently than not always, but more frequently than not, to the CISO, the Chief Information Security Officer.
Yep.
So that person sits on the IT side. They don't know OT. They don't understand how that environment works. Traditionally, those have been separate worlds, but not to the board. Board just says, okay, go make us safe. And the CISO's going, if I go to that site and I start telling them about how to make them safe through cyber, they're going to throw me out.
Right.
Right. They're going to say, don't touch my stuff.
Right.
And so you start getting some conflicts also sometimes within that, because they're kind of caught between a rock and a hard place. But let's say they get past that. You still have some other of these basic issues. You already mentioned legacy. So that's the second one, right? So you got the board directives and the legacy. But then you also have some other additional ones where the basics aren't there. Cyber on the IT side has been up and running for a while, and they've been thinking about stuff. But if you ask some of the basic questions to most of the critical infrastructure, things like, do you know what you need to protect? We call that asset inventory or asset management, but do you know what you need to protect? 9 times out of 10, they'll say, not really. Okay, we have people with clipboards walking around. We're not sure what we have. Again, some things are hit our network, some things are serials, some things are this, and that. Just all sorts of stuff in there. So they're not even sure what they have in the environment, which how could you build the rest of the questions, which I ask things like, do you know where your holes are?
Right.
Can you see if someone's in there? Can you get them out? Can you train your people? Like all these types of basic questions, the foundational ones, haven't been answered, and they're starting to try to figure that out, which is that third point. And the last one is what you said about digitization. They're like, We don't distinguish often between IT and OT at the senior levels where we should.
Right.
And that's between cybersecurity and other initiatives. We'll just digitize everything. We'll move everything to the cloud. We'll put AI in everything. We've heard that. Let's just put some AI. It's like cowbell. We need more AI in
Yeah.
this, right?
Yeah.
And the people who are actually trying to get things up and running and going, that's fine. But at the same time, they're saying, make us safe and make sure we keep running.
Right.
Like, yeah, you said two different things there, and we need to manage both.
So I know that when we talked before the show, you told me that there's this myth of the air gap, and the air gap is there's usually a solid line of no connections between IT and OT. It feels like if I'm on the OT side, my solution to preventing cyber attacks would be like, well, I'm not connecting anything. Yeah. And do you still see this attitude in the space? And why do you believe that this is a myth?
Yeah, so I'll go, why would I see the myth, and then I'll answer the second part, which
Sure.
is, where do I see it? And so why do I see it as a myth? Because I have in my career seen this often. We have this thing, they call it a DMZ, a demilitarized zone. It's a firewall between IT and OT,
Yep.
and nobody crosses that. And they say, that's not only connection to OT, it's walled off, it's super safe. So I start asking basic questions like, do you have employees? Oh, you have some.
Right.
Oh, then, okay. Then, do you have any third party ever? Do you have a supply chain? Do you have suppliers coming in? How do you update the equipment in there? Right? How do you go? And I'll get more technical talking about HMI systems and other things and how they connect out. And do you now use IIoT, right? IoT for industry. So
Right.
all the drones and all the stuff running out there, that doesn't go to either network. That goes straight to the internet. That's straight internet connected. And I'm pretty sure if I took one of those over in an operating environment, I could do some damage. So this whole Purdue model is starting to meld or collapse, but it's this distinction between IT and OT isn't as much. Plus, I can have an IT attack that has an OT consequence. So all this mixed together in this air gap, it's a myth. It has been a myth for a while. I'm hearing it less and less, but I still hear it.
Yep.
Okay. What's being replaced, thank goodness on it, is more of what we call a consequence driven. Okay. The board of directors, again, doesn't care about IT and OT and who's on the camp and who's a shark and who's a jet and who's fighting this. And they don't care about any of that stuff. Okay. They all only care about safety up to the risks. Let's go list the risks that we have and let's do the risk-based approach. Top on that list is safety. Second one's going to be uptime. Then we're going to start talking about, protecting RP and yada, 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 all that. And so they start, companies, the ones that are a little more forward leaning, are starting to say, okay, we're going to care about the consequence. We don't care where the attack came from and what is causing this kind of consequence. And
right.
we have the really, really bad ones, and we're going to work our way down. And of course, like a risk, traditional bow tie, it's impact and probability, like risk, the probability of attack and the impact, right?
Right.
And so they're going to try to measure on and control those both. But they're doing it off that consequence driven, which is reshaping this whole kind of game as we start moving forward. That's one of the things when I say the complexion is changing, it's because that focus is changing onto where the consequence is really going. Because you're not going to go to the board and say, well, that was really IT's problem, or that really was OT's problem, or that was really the internet's problem. It's our problem.
Yeah.
We own it. It's our systems.
Is that something that a CISO or the IT group can be the champion of, or do you really do need OT on board for something like this? Like, does IT need to speak more OT to them?
Yeah, I think IT it's a collaboration, right?
Yeah.
So if IT has a traditional expertise, hey, we've been dealing with cyber for a while, but OT has its own very different environment. Things just work differently.
Right.
And I need to go deal with operations on live operations. I now have things I don't have to care for. That means I've got one side of this. I've got the expertise, but you hold the risk. The risk is held by operations, right? And so how do we work together? And the most effective ones are figuring out how they champion together, how they meld that together, knowing that, again, this digital front line is in our equipment. This digital front line is in our devices. So we got to get together. We have a common enemy, an actual adversary, active ones trying to get in. So that's the attitude that is most successful in this. So yeah, they absolutely, CISOs can be champions of this, and they definitely need to know more about OT, because if they don't know, if you're in critical infrastructure and you're sitting right now as a CISO today, and you're like, that OT thing is not something I should pay attention to, you probably won't be a CISO at that company in 5 years.
Right,
okay?
Right.
You better learn it because that risk is there, and it is the risks that they have to deal with, and it sits in operations. So if
Right.
you don't know that, then
But
somebody else who does will be sitting in your seat.
but you also support the idea of digitization for a lot of these utilities and groups. Like, do they need to do a better job of explaining the benefits of digitization for a lot of these OT equipment? Or, you can't just say, well, it's because I'm just putting an internet browser around my refrigerator, for example. Like, that's just a consumer thing. Like, digitization in the consumer world is like, well, we're just going to add internet connectivity to everything and life will be better. And then you go like, but it's not really helping me at all. But can you convince them that, well, if we do connect to our systems, we can almost do predictive analytics so that we know if the equipment's about to fail. I think that's the big selling point that I hear a lot in the industrial space.
I would
do a
say
better job
you
of
don't
that.
necessarily need to oversell or convince OT. I think they get it.
Okay.
Like they understand
Right.
that if I can, because they're all about efficiency, right?
Right.
We're trying to get we're trying to get uptime and efficiency and the most about, and it's not a hard case to make that if we do predictive analytics, or we're very resource constrained in our people. So we have experts that we can leverage across a lot of places, okay, across our whole portfolio. And that's the remote, remote coming in, or we have sustainability goals that we're able to hit, like all these types of things they get. But what it's almost saying, we understand that, but we also have to understand your environment, but how that gets that done. You don't just lift and shift things to the cloud. You don't just it doesn't work like IT. So if you can understand and meet us where we are and understand how we deal with it and the risks we deal, then we go.
Yeah.
And a lot of that comes into, by the way, I would offer that on OT side, they've mapped out those consequences, a thing called process safety. They've done that. So if IT says, hey, we're going to actually fit into what you already know about process safety and meld those, is just another way of impacting that. That's now talking to the language. You got to meet them where they are.
Right. I wanted to bring it back to the types of attacks that people are seeing. Are you also seeing a change in the types of groups that are doing these? Because I'm always assuming that, if you're going to attack an industrial site, or, you're going to attack a utility like a water plant or an electrical grid, that kind of thing, I always assume that that's probably nation state actors. And, it's just it's the political enemies of the United States. But, what else? What are the other types of groups that might be going after this? Because I could probably think of some, but why don't you tell me what you're seeing? And is one group more popular than the others, or is it just a big fire hose like we said earlier?
Well, I mean, as you know, nation states are always going to have their interests, and they have the best training, the best funding, the most focus. So they're absolutely always going to be there. But you have other threat actors who care about this, and as attack surface grows, and as bad guys' capabilities grow and the tool sets grow, and it makes it easier. You almost have, hacking as a service kind of thing where you don't have to be the expert. You're opening that up to a broader array of threat actors. So you have people like organized crime. Organized crime is often, that's where ransomware, those kind of things, because they want money. So the nation states have their political interests and economic interests and, all the different kinds of areas that they have. But now you've got people like organized crime that would say, hey, I can make a buck. Right. So if I can hold your HR data hostage, what if I could hold your entire operations hostage?
Yeah.
Right. For ransom. So that there's a motivation there for them. And then when you go into others, so you have hacktivists. So activists who are trying to use this as a means of, you have terrorists who can come in. But as it becomes more available, so you have, any crime comes down to motive and opportunity. Well, they had the motive. I mean, having cyber physical effects, making things go boom, okay, is definitely a motive for a lot of people.
Right.
Motive. Now you're talking about opportunity. Opportunity comes either your attack surface is going, or you're making the attacks easier and more broadly available to different sets of bad guys. That is part of this changing complexion of what you have. Would I say, do I know exactly who's going to be popping up next? No, that's part of the fun of having an unknown environment. And that's what you have to prepare for.
That's what keeps all the security people up at night, is trying to think about all that, exactly. that stuff.
It'd be a little paranoid.
That's
okay.
Yeah. It's okay to be paranoid if you're in security.
Oh, I tell my customers I'm paranoid so they don't have to.
There you go. And we've talked a lot on the show about a lot of the problems and some of the attacks that happen, but I think sometimes we forget to talk about what's going well, because obviously some things are going well. Otherwise we'd be hearing about this every day or every week, or not as often. We don't hear this as often as we might, or are we doing a good job? Like what, tell me about some of the positive things that are going on.
Sure, and there are, and
Yeah.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. We don't want to be doom and gloom,
Right.
okay, all the time, because what'll happen is people get cyber fatigued. Like I got it, okay, sky's falling, everything else, and
Right.
the answer is not that. You can actually build a home field advantage, meaning this whole thing is fought in your home field. It's in your operations, it's in your devices, it's in your stuff, but it's yours. So if you create the right kind of visibility and the right kind of control, those are the two things cyber often comes down to: visibility and control, and you have that over your environment. You can build that a home field advantage. You know what strategy is going next. You have the relationships with your third party and supply chain. You have certain things that are to your advantage. So build that home field advantage, and people who are leaning into it understand that, and that's great. And they're doing it by hitting the basics, the questions we had said earlier. Do you know what you need to protect? Do you know where your holes are? Can you see someone in there in your systems? Can you get them out? Can you train your people? These are the basics. We're not talking about anything super fancy
Right.
in operations technology, but there are people who are, a lot of companies and that are doing it. Plus the industry itself. You've got government doing a lot of support activity, saying not just mandates that, but we've got resources and other things that you can go after, that you can use, you can leverage. You've got different types of communities in that people who say, well, traditionally, we may be competitors, but in this area, we're going to actually share information.
Right.
We're actually going to, this one, we're going to band together. Bad guys are banding together. We should be banding together. So you have things like information sharing going on in there. So
Are you finding that happening more often than it used to? Because it always felt like companies did not want to share any information around their security. Again, security people are generally paranoid by nature. So the fact that you would share this information seems to go against what probably their nature is. But are you seeing that more, and that they're seeing the benefits of that sharing?
definitely the benefits.
Yeah.
And I have over the last 5 or 10 years certainly seen it more in industrial, but it needs to be a facilitated process. Sometimes you got regulatory reasons why you can't share
Okay.
information. So it's not just, hey, I just don't want to, and they're competitors. They have to get over that.
Yeah.
But you have to have a facilitated arena for that. Meaning, we're going to share this kind of data. It's going to be anonymized. But it's going to be a warning system. Or you're going to have other kind of threat centers that can be able to collect that, or government centers who can do that and send out broader alerts. And people said, yeah, I want to be part of that. Right? You have lots of different types of organizations that are out there that are helping facilitate that discussion, because they know how important it is to share. Because let's say I'm, one producer, one thing. If someone else gets attacked in my industry, or even in an adjacent industry, likely I'm next on that list, right? They're going to go down that list. So what happened there, and how they do it, and how do you defend it, and where it's going?
Yeah.
So is it getting better? It always is getting better. There's always a trend up. Is it where it always needs to be? No, because there's still reticence, because there's these natural barriers to go do it. So it's always a sort of escalation.
Yeah. Do you think that the raising awareness of a lot of these issues helps or hurts in this case? Like, and again, we could blame the media as much as we want, but if a media spotlight is on a certain thing, does that put more pressure for these organizations, or is it better if you kind of work with others in the industry but don't publicize any attack?
Well, there's a couple points wrapped up into that. So yeah. I think sharing information is sharing information. You can do it, and you can do it in a proper way. Bringing concepts to it, like saying like this podcast right now, right? Just getting general awareness. You need to do stuff. You need to go out there. This is what the environment like. Here's some best practices. Never a bad thing. Always want to get that out there. You want to talk about it.
Yeah.
Here's a changing threat. So you can't talk about it enough in that context. I do understand that some customers sometimes are reticent of saying, hey, we don't want to brag about what we're doing, because we might make us a bigger target.
Right.
I would offer to say, if you do it in the right way, saying we take this so seriously, then they may want to go to a different person who doesn't take it as seriously. Who knows, right? There's arguments on both sides of that. But when you come into saying, does it hurt to talk about it? I say it really doesn't, because I think you as long as you're not pointing fingers and shaming.
Yeah.
Okay, that's one thing that you need to talk about. But if you're doing open communications about what's going on and how to do, how to share. Never a bad thing.
Yeah, like the analogy you just talked about made me think of people that have like a giant ADT sign on outside of their house because and if you were going to burgle the house. I can't believe I just used the word burgle. Sorry. You'd point at your neighbor and go, well, go attack that house because they're not protected. We're protected.
There's certainly an argument to be made for that.
Yeah.
And that's it's saying there's different reasons why you might want to say, hey guys, we're taking this. We're not getting cocky. We're not bragging.
Right.
Okay. We're actually deferential. Like this is a thing, but we're considering it. It's a thing. So we're going to do stuff about it. We're going to band together on it. There's a powerful message in that and how people go. But again, it's to each company of what they want to say. There's not always a lot of obligation to report, which is a challenge for the industry. When they say, well, what's a frequency? And when you ask me, hey, what's an emergent thing? Or you said, I haven't heard stuff in a few weeks. Doesn't mean that stuff isn't happening.
Right.
Okay. It's just not necessarily being reported or they haven't really identified it as an issue yet. Right. It's going to be popping somewhere else. So it doesn't mean it's not there. It just means that it's not getting out.
Yeah. So then the other thing that, we can raise awareness, all this, we can talk about all of the different preparations that we're on top of everything. We've got enough budget. And then in the end, there was a report the other day about the world's worst passwords and people are still using the password 1234556. And you just want to tear your hair out because it's like, even if we have all of these things, you could still have an employer, a supplier, a drone maker, like you said earlier, that could just all of a sudden throw everything for a loop because of their bad security practices. So, what do you do in that case? Like, do you just have to pound it over everybody's head, stop doing these dumb things?
Well, first of all, there's a couple things about that and what you just said. One is we are all part of an ecosystem where no one is in a vacuum, right? You mentioned it, suppliers, you have contractors come in, you have different, and you're connected to a whole world of networks out there in ways that you're dependent on and getting more and more dependent. So first thing is to say we are part of a community and part of an ecosystem and mega communities that come together. And sometimes in that we have to map out where our dependencies are. Sometimes I call them super dependencies, where you're coming in and there's this big effect that could take a large swath of the operations offline, but no one thought about it. Right. And so you have to map where those are and understand how to collaborate beyond your small group. You have to expand that sphere to a larger ecosystem of what we're doing. So, that's part of what you have to understand when we're dealing with this.
Yeah. All right. And you can't get away with being on this show without talking about artificial intelligence. So I'm going to bring that up too. Is the industry looking at this? Are they aware of it? Are they, concerned about the bad guys using AI in some of their attacks? But also, are they also looking at AI technologies as a way to help protect themselves or defend against these attacks? Or is it because, again, the IT OT thing is still a little slower on digitization that maybe they're not thinking about this at this point? Or yet.
I think everybody's thinking about it. If someone hasn't heard or thought about AI at this point, I don't know. They just haven't. They've been living in.
I mean, it has been 2 years, right? Well, at least with the latest version of generative AI.
Yeah, but in OT, first of all, it is, as with everything else, a fundamentally different environment, and it has the power. It is already fundamentally changing. Again, I said that before, the complexion, the perspective, and in this sense, it means that there's 3 levels of which that starts impacting. One is, do I use AI as a tool in my industrial cybersecurity? And do the bad guys use it as a tool? So that's your sort of inside your industrial cyber sphere.
Yeah.
Okay. And that is, I call it AI versus AI. So how are they using it? How are we using it? Are they using it to scan my vulnerabilities? Can I use it to scan my vulnerabilities? Can I use it as a tool in different ways to set up my defenses? Can they use it as an attack? So now you're doing escalation. So if you're not thinking about it and they are, you're gonna get creamed on that one.
Right.
So you've got to start thinking your way through. But that's only the first phase of that. Then the next sphere out is, my company's using AI now, my enterprise AI, that affects my operations, that could affect my safety and my uptime. right? And so now I have to think about how are they, because they're going to turn to me if something happens and someone affects that and affects the whole thing in the operation. So it's not just how I'm employing it,
Right.
it's how my enterprise is employing it. And then the last piece is I call AI in the wild, right? Now, who's using it? Is a supplier using it? Is my tool? Who's using that now? And how can that? Is there a super dependency somewhere in there that I have to map out and figure in? So whether you want to say I never want to use it or I'm 100% in, you're in it, right? You know you just think about it. What is it? I think of Pirates of the Caribbean, right? You, you better start believing in ghost stories because you're in one.
Right. Right.
But you're in AI. You're in that environment. You just need to go and you're there now. And whether you pick up the tools or not, how it works in OT is way different, right? Like you said, legacy systems, how we do, where we're connecting stuff, how does that work? How does cloud work in that? Because that's where a lot of AI is going to be living. And cloud in OT is not a lift and shift, as I said before. It's a whole different game.
Yeah.
So how it's done is a whole different game. But I told I often when I talk to OT industry, I'll say, listen, you have some time in this OT because of these legacy systems. So you have some time to figure out, but you do not have a nanosecond to lose because you don't want to be behind that wave.
Right. Right. All right, we are getting at the end of 2024, and as you look ahead into 2025, are you optimistic or are you pessimistic? If we, are we going to see more and more of these attacks, or do we think that the industry is aware enough about them, ready to go, ready to fight the bad guys for to protect these critical infrastructures?
Well, I'm a paranoid optimist.
That's the first time I've heard that. That's really good. So explain what you mean by that. Yeah.
Yeah. So the paranoid part obviously is part of what I do for a job. I'm trying to figure out all the different things that can happen. So again, clients don't, but you also see trends, again, connectivity happening. Not everyone knows moving as quickly, that risk profile going higher. And so that's a challenge. That's the paranoid part. And that will continue to go as we do. We still have some of those so people will say there's air gaps and don't want to do about it, and they're reticent to move on. Fewer and fewer, yay, but they're there. And so how does that fit? And anytime you're in critical infrastructure, that's significant, right? Because it's site safety, it's public safety, environmental safety, economic stability, national security. It hits all the issues. So
right.
It's serious stuff you're dealing with, but at the same time, I'm encouraged by a lot of what's happening as far as information sharing. More and more clients looking to build this in from their greenfield projects, right from the beginning, not just bolted on later as in they know they have to do both, right? I got to take my existing stuff, but I'm starting to now get this into our capital committee discussions. And when we do major modifications or greenfield stuff, I'm starting getting into my sustainability discussions. I'm starting getting into all these other areas,
right,
and starting to thinking about it differently. They're also stuff, to the consequence driven stuff, trying to figure out IT, OT. They're just trying to look at the consequence of what's happening and build back. So there's more, like thinking about it as safety, building it in from the beginning, right? Having more connectivity or more conversations about it. So there's that optimism side, but you got to have both, because you don't want to say, oh, everything's great, we're totally going to win now. You're not in that environment. You're never going to be in that environment.
Yeah, paranoid optimism is it just sounds like you're being a realist at this point.
Yeah, exactly. Fair enough.
You're just playing it right down the middle. You're like, yeah, I'm paranoid, but also I'm hopeful, which I guess is better than being a paranoid pessimist, because right, at that point,
that's tough to wake up in the morning.
Yeah, yeah. Then you're just a miserable person all day long. Ian Bramson, again, you're the first person I think who's ever dropped a Pirates of the Caribbean and West Side Story reference in a podcast about cybersecurity. So I'm going to give you an award there. Thank you again for joining us on the show. This is a great conversation.
Well, I thank you very much for having me on. I appreciate it very much.
All right, that's all the time we have for today's episode. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, add any thoughts you have below. Join us every week for new episodes of Today in Tech. I'm Keith Shaw. Thanks for watching.